Envelope had been sitting in my grandmother's Bible for 31 years, and my father used it to wipe barbecue sauce off his hands. I watched him do it, watched him pull that yellowed envelope out of the small cedar box my grandmother had left me, her handwriting on the front, my name in blue ink, the letters careful the way old people write when they know something matters. And he just grabbed it, folded it once, dragged it across his fingers, and dropped it on the picnic table like it was a napkin. "Junk," he said. "Your grandmother kept everything. Absolute hoarder." My husband Joel, I need to pause on that name, not Joel. My husband's name is Miles. Miles was standing 3 feet away holding 2 paper plates, and he went very still the way he does when he's deciding whether to say something. He decided not to. I loved him for that. I also wished he had. I picked the envelope up off the table. The back flap had come unsealed from the heat or the years or both, and when I tilted it, something slid halfway out. It looked like a document. Folded in thirds, the kind of paper that feels heavier than regular paper. I started to open it. My father took it out of my hands. Not roughly. That's the thing about my father. He rarely did things roughly. He did them smoothly, with a half smile, in a way that made you feel crazy for objecting. He took it out of my hands the way you'd take a sharp object from a toddler. Gently, condescendingly. "I'll look through all of this tonight," he said. "Your grandmother's estate is complicated. There are things that need to go through me first." My grandmother had died 6 weeks earlier, quietly in her sleep in the house she'd owned for 40 years in rural Pennsylvania. She was 83. She had outlived one husband, 2 sisters, and approximately 9,000 casseroles she brought to other people's funerals. She was the toughest woman I've ever known and also the most private. She had told me, twice in the last year of her life, that she had taken care of me. Those were her exact words. "I've taken care of you, sweetheart." I thought she meant emotionally, the way grandmothers mean things. I did not think she meant financially. I should back up. My father is the kind of man who fills a room, not in the warm way, in the weather system way. We're constantly checking which direction he's moving and adjusting accordingly. He grew up working class, built a small construction business in his 30s, and never stopped treating every family gathering like a quarterly earnings call where he was always the only shareholder who mattered. My mother left when I was 11. My brother stayed close to our father. I went to college in Ohio, got a nursing degree, married Miles, moved to Columbus, kept a polite distance. My grandmother was my father's mother, which is maybe why I never understood how different they were. She was quiet, where he was loud. She thought before she spoke. She said things. Not in the hoarder way my father said, but in the way people who lived through scarcity save things, because objects hold meaning and meaning doesn't expire. She saved that envelope for 31 years with my name on it. My father had it for 4 days before I asked for it back. He said he'd already dealt with it, recycled the paperwork, nothing important. I said that was addressed to me. He said, "And you're welcome, because I saved you from a headache. It was an old insurance document, lapsed policy, worthless." I want to tell you that I pushed back harder in that moment. I want to tell you I raised my voice, or demanded details, or called a lawyer on the spot. But I didn't. I was standing in my childhood home, which still smells like the same fabric softener it always did, and my father was looking at me the way he always looked at me when I tried to hold a boundary. Like I was a minor inconvenience he was generously tolerating, and I said okay, and I left. Miles was quiet in the car for a long time. Then he said, "You know that's not what it was." I did know. Here's the thing about growing up with a man like my father. You learn to doubt your own instincts. You learn that your read on a situation is probably wrong. That you're probably being dramatic. That he probably being dramatic. That he probably knows better. That training runs deep. I was 31 years old and still fighting it. But I had one thing my father didn't know about. My grandmother had a lawyer. His name was Mr. Aldrich. She'd used him for decades, a semi-retired estate attorney who worked out of a small office in the town where she'd lived. I had his number because 2 years earlier, when my grandmother had a minor health scare, she had handed me a card and said, "If something happens, call Bernard first, before you call anyone else." She had pressed her hand over mine when she said it. I called Bernard Aldrich on a Tuesday morning from the parking lot of the hospital where I worked. He picked up on the second ring. I told him who I was. There was a pause, and then he said, "I've been hoping you'd call. Your grandmother told me you would." Eventually, he asked me to come in. I drove to Pennsylvania on a Thursday. I didn't tell my father. Mr. Aldrich's office was above a hardware store on the main street of a town I'd driven through 100 times without stopping. He was in his late 70s, white-haired, with the careful, deliberate manner of someone who had spent a lifetime choosing words. He shook my hand and pointed to a chair and set a manila folder on the desk between us. Inside the folder was a document I didn't immediately understand. It was a payable-on-death designation. My grandmother had opened a certificate of deposit account at a regional credit union in 1991. She had named me, my full legal name, my date of birth, as the sole beneficiary, not my father, not my brother, me. She had been adding to it for 31 years. Mr. Aldrich let me sit with the number for a moment before he said anything. "I'll tell you the number because it matters to the story. $340,000, accumulated through decades of small, steady deposits, plus compound interest on the CDs she'd rolled over again and again, plus a lump sum she'd moved in from the sale of a small parcel of land she owned in 2018. She had never touched the principal. $340,000, with my name on it, legally mine the moment she passed." I said, "My father told me the document she left me was a lapsed insurance policy." Mr. Aldrich looked at me over his glasses. He said, "Your grandmother anticipated that your father might intercept her communication to you. That is why she gave me a copy of the beneficiary designation directly, and why she instructed me to hold it until you contacted me." My grandmother had planned for my father's interference. She had built a workaround. She had trusted me enough to call, and trusted Mr. Aldrich enough to wait. I sat in that office for 2 hours. Mr. Aldrich walked me through everything. The POD designation meant the account passed directly to me outside of probate. It was never part of my grandmother's estate, technically, which meant my father's role as executor was entirely irrelevant to this money. He couldn't touch it. He couldn't claim it. He couldn't delay it. What my grandmother had left me required only a death certificate and my identification to access. He also told me something else. My father had called him. About a week after my grandmother died, before I'd thought to reach out, my father had called Mr. Aldrich, representing himself as the sole executor of the estate and asking for a full accounting of any accounts or assets in my grandmother's name. Mr. Bassett's. Aldrich, who had been doing this for 50 years, had told him politely that he would need written authorization from each named beneficiary to discuss their designations, and that he was not in a position to provide a blanket accounting without proper documentation from all parties. My father had pushed. Mr. Aldrich had said the same thing, more slowly. My father had then told Mr. Aldrich that his daughter, me, was estranged from the family and had made clear she wanted nothing to do with her grandmother's estate. Mr. Aldrich had said, "I'll wait to hear that from her directly." I looked at this man I'd never met and I thought, she chose well. My grandmother, who never wasted anything, had not wasted this choice. I left with a certified copy of the beneficiary designation, Mr. Aldrich's direct number, and specific instructions on which credit union branch to contact and what to bring. I called Miles from the parking lot. When I told him the number, he was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, "Your grandmother was something else." She really was. The credit union was 40 minutes away. I went the next morning. I brought my ID, my grandmother's death certificate, the beneficiary designation, and my birth certificate. The woman at the new accounts desk, young, efficient, slightly bored until she wasn't, pulled up the account and then excused herself to get her manager. The manager was a man in his 50s named Mr. Okafor, and he came out and shook my hand and asked if I'd like to step into his office. He was not alarmed. He was, if anything, careful in the way people are careful when large sums are involved. He verified every document. He asked me several questions. He made a copy of everything. Then he said, "Ms." and he used my last name, "This account is yours. All documentation is in order. How would you like to proceed? I asked him to transfer it to an account at my bank in Columbus. He nodded and said they could initiate that same day and it would clear within 3 to 5 business days. And that was it. No drama, no alarm, no one came rushing in. Just a quiet office and a man doing his job, and my grandmother's 31 years of careful saving finally arriving where she had always intended it to go. I want to tell you the next part carefully because I've gone back and forth about whether I handled it right. My father called me that weekend. This was not unusual. He called every few weeks, always about the estate, always with some new administrative task he needed me to sign off on, or some asset he was managing on everyone's behalf. The calls were transactional, and I had learned to treat them as such. This time he mentioned, almost in passing, that he had found an old account in my grandmother's name that was taking some time to close out, something at a credit union. He was looking into it. I didn't tell him I already knew. I said, "Let me know if you need anything from me." He said he would. He didn't know I had already been to the credit union. He didn't know the transfer had already been initiated. He didn't know that Mr. Aldrich had a file with my name on it and had been waiting for my call for 6 weeks. He thought he had a week or two before I'd figure it out, if I ever did. He thought the envelope he'd taken from me, the one with my name in my grandmother's handwriting, was safely disposed of. What he didn't know was that I had one more call to make. I want to be clear, I did not go looking for trouble. I did not set out to expose my father or build a case against him or orchestrate any kind of confrontation. But when I spoke to Mr. Perrin Aldrich a second time to update him that I had accessed the account successfully, he mentioned something almost as an aside. He said, "You should be aware, your father's representation to me that you were estranged and wanted no involvement in the estate may constitute a misrepresentation of material fact to an estate proceeding. Depending on what other actions he's taken as executor, that may be worth looking into." He gave me the name of an estate litigation attorney in Philadelphia. I called her. Her name was Miss Reyes, and she was not someone who wasted words. I sent her everything Mr. Aldrich had given me, plus a written summary of the conversation I'd had with my father when he took the envelope. She called me back the following week. She said, "Your father made a misrepresentation to an estate attorney for the purpose of suppressing a beneficiary designation. That's a problem for him." She said there were other irregularities in the estate that warranted a closer look. Some transactions that had moved through accounts in the weeks after my grandmother's death that didn't align with standard executor conduct. She said she would need more documentation to proceed, but that if what she suspected was accurate, my father had been doing more than just intercepting my mail. I want to pause here because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, was he really that bad? Or are you just angry about the envelope? I thought about that too. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about my mother leaving when I was 11 and the things she'd said to me the day she passed that I had spent 20 years telling myself to forget. I thought about every holiday table where my father had announced my brother's accomplishments and asked me when I was going to do something real with my life, as if nursing was a placeholder. I thought about the semester I almost failed because I was working 30 hours a week and couldn't ask him for money because asking always cost more than the amount. I thought about all the years I had told myself he wasn't that bad. And then I thought about my grandmother, sitting in her house in Pennsylvania, opening a savings account in secret, in my name, and adding to it for 31 years without ever mentioning it to me. Not because she wanted to surprise me, because she knew her own son, and she had quietly, methodically made sure he could not get to what she was building for me. She hadn't left it to chance. She hadn't hoped for the best. She had planned. If my grandmother, who loved her son, who made excuses for him, who never said a direct bad word about him to me in her life, had felt the need to do all of that, then I was done telling myself he wasn't that bad. Ms. Reyes filed a petition for a formal accounting of the estate in early November. The petition triggered a review by the probate court. My father had to produce documentation of every action he had taken as executor since my grandmother's death, every account he had accessed, every asset he had valued or transferred, every decision he had made on behalf of the estate. The review took 11 weeks. I am not going to go through all of it, partly because some of it is still ongoing in ways I can't discuss, and partly because the details are less important than the shape of it. The shape of it was this. My father had used his position as executor to accelerate the transfer of certain personal property to himself and my brother ahead of distribution. He had undervalued the house in the estate filing. He had drawn executor's fees that exceeded what Pennsylvania law permits without court approval. None of it was subtle. It was the way someone behaves when they expect no one is watching. Someone was watching. The probate court issued a formal ruling in January. My father was removed as executor. A neutral administrator was appointed. The estate was formally revalued. My brother, who I genuinely believe had less awareness of what was happening than he should have, is cooperating with the process. We've spoken twice. It is not warm, but it is not hostile. He is figuring out who he is, independent of our father's gravity, which I suspect is something he's never had to do before. I don't envy him that. My father hired a lawyer and is contesting the ruling. That process is ongoing. I am not losing sleep over it. The money my grandmother left me is in a high-yield savings account in Columbus. Miles and I used part of it to pay off the last of my student loans. We put the rest toward a down payment on a house, a real house, with a backyard and a detached garage and a kitchen that gets morning light. We moved in March. The house needed work. That's fine. I know how to work. On the first night we slept there, I sat on the back porch after Miles had gone to bed, and I thought about my grandmother, about her hands, which were always slightly rough, about the way she made coffee, too strong, in a percolator she'd had since the 80s, about how she used to sit across from me at her kitchen table and watch me eat like feeding me was one of the great projects of her life. She never told me about the account. I used to wonder why. I think I understand now. She didn't want me to wait for it. She didn't want me to build my life around a safety net I could see. She wanted me to build the life first and have the net there when I needed it. She wanted me to become the person who could handle what she was leaving before I ever knew it was coming. She was right. I wasn't ready at 22 or 25. I might not have been ready at 28, but I was ready at 31, standing in a lawyer's office above a hardware store, understanding for the first time that the quietest person in my family had also been the most powerful. I kept the cedar box. The envelope is gone. My father made sure of that. But the box is on the bookshelf in the new house. And sometimes I run my hand over it just to feel the grain of the wood, just to remember that she held it too. She took care of me. She really did. I think about the cedar box a lot, not the money, the box. The fact that my grandmother chose that particular object to put her handwriting on, that she pressed a card into my palm 2 years before she died and said, "Call Bernard first," that she built something for 31 years without ever once hinting it existed. There's a kind of love in that kind of patience that I don't have a clean word for. What my father did wasn't complicated. He saw an opportunity and he took it, the way he always had, because for most of his life, no one had made him pay for it. That's the thing about people who operate on shortcuts. They get very good at reading the room for weakness and very bad at imagining that the room might change. He looked at me and saw the same daughter who had said okay and driven away. He didn't see what I had become in the years since I left that house. I used to think resilience was about pushing through hard things in real time, gritting your teeth while something hurts and coming out the other side still standing. I don't think that anymore. I think real resilience is slower and quieter than that. It's what you build in the ordinary years, when nothing dramatic is happening. The degree you finished while working 30 hours a week. The boundaries you held even when they cost you. The slow, steady process of learning to trust your own read on a situation even when someone who was supposed to love you spent years telling you that your instincts were wrong. By the time I sat in Mr. Aldrich's office, I wasn't brave in some sudden heroic way. I was just finally finished doubting myself. That's what 31 years of living honestly will do for you. My grandmother understood something I'm still learning. That integrity isn't just about being honest with other people. It's about refusing to lie to yourself about what you're seeing. She saw her son clearly. She didn't perform bitterness about it, and she didn't perform bitterness about it, and she didn't pretend it wasn't true. She just worked with reality as it was, and she built something within it that he couldn't touch. That's not cynicism. That's wisdom. The hard-earned kind, the kind that doesn't require an audience. I think about Ms. Reyes too. The way she said your father made a misrepresentation to an estate attorney in that flat, factual tone, like she was reading a weather report. There was no drama in it. The truth didn't need drama. It just needed someone who knew how to hold it steady and point it in the right direction. My grandmother left me $340,000 and a cedar box and a lesson I keep unpacking. The money built a house. The box sits on a shelf. The lesson is harder to describe, but I feel it when Miles and I drink coffee in the morning kitchen with the good light coming through, when I drive to work and don't dread what I owe, when I make a decision and don't spend 3 days second-guessing it. It feels like standing on ground that's actually solid. She took care of me, and somewhere in the process of receiving that care, I finally learned how to take care of myself.